Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The End Credits, the podcast where two brothers discuss their thoughts on a film of their choosing. I'm Dominic,
I'm Jonathan.
and today we are talking about George Cukor's American romantic comedy, The Philadelphia Story. For me, I have to say that I felt like the story was actually going to go in a different direction, so it's not what I expected.
Yeah, definitely for me too. I thought I had like a different vision in mind when I heard of who was involved in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think just like a general sense is like maybe it was a bit overcomplicated at parts
Yeah.
because it's like a very much of a heavy dialogue film. So like it's easy to like kind of like, okay, was that what happened there? Am I like understanding it correctly? Or
Right.
maybe another part of the film changed your mind on certain scenarios. So it's like, I don't know. I had to do some like a little bit of research, just to see, it's like, okay, is this what happened? Am I, understanding it correctly? And I think I know, what occurred, but I'm excited to like talk about it with you right now.
Yeah, I just feel like I was a bit confused with the story at first and, not going too much into depth right now, but I felt like some of the scenes were just choppy and the dialogue was quite fast, but we'll get into that.
The American romantic comedy film The Philadelphia Story was directed by George Cukor with a release date of December 26, 1940. Had a runtime of 112 minutes and it stars Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, and James Stewart. When a rich woman's ex-husband and a tabloid-type reporter turns up just before her planned remarriage, she begins to learn the truth about herself.
Yeah, that's the basic premise of the story. Again, I feel like just first impressions, I just felt like the scenes felt very choppy. Like it was hard to follow at times. Like it wasn't just about the dialogue, but I just felt like certain scenes just didn't connect. Like with the camera, for example. Like whenever we were talking with one character, then we moved to the next, it just didn't. It didn't line up properly, and it was a little strange. It was jarring to me, and I felt like the dialogue was just quite like it was all over the place. And it was a little hard to follow at times, but I think I did get the gist of everything. So
I want to say what was actually like distracting was the fact that there was too much star power, maybe in my mind. The fact that there was Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, and James Stewart in the same film.
yeah,
I don't think there was enough room for each of them to play their like dynamic roles, maybe for me. Just because like they had to like give attention to each individual, whereas I think alone they could easily do their own movie.
right, yeah, definitely. I don't know if the star power really affected me any. I think I'm used to seeing all three of them in films, so I just felt like.
But together, like, because usually
Right.
you might get one,
Right, or two.
maybe two, but three is like,
It did feel weird, but I wasn't distracted by it at all. I felt like Jimmy Stewart definitely was like fantastic, like as usual, and I thought he was the thing that stood out the most. And I felt like personally he was more convincing than Cary Grant in this film.
I actually think each of them did what like I think of them when they did their their roles as like I guess like a what do you call it when like an actor just does their thing? What do you call that sort of scenario?
I mean, perhaps just their type or their kind of role.
Yeah, basically, like I feel like as if they played their part correctly, as you would imagine,
As you would
them,
expect them to play.
too. Or like Jimmy Stewart, he plays this everyday man, and he was so loose throughout this film. You could just tell by his demeanor.
Yeah.
Whereas Cary Grant, he's kind of like he doesn't really do anything, but like that's his like MO, I guess, where he's
Right.
like he's very much in the right place at the right time.
Has
He's-
witty dialogue.
Yeah, it says the things, at the correct moments, and basically just everybody's like can get behind him at some point. And then Katharine Hepburn, I always felt, because the only film I've actually seen her in prior to this is is it The Lion in the North or The Lion in Winter? Some older movie where she plays like I believe it was like the semi villain of that one.
Okay.
Where she was like a really strong and like threatening woman, basically, right?
Yeah.
Or like she could take down anybody. And like I guess that I always thought about that about her, where she's like the strong woman.
Yeah.
And like in comparison to like other type of women during this age of film, that they were basically behind like a man of some sort, where I felt that like it was different with Katharine Hepburn, where she was basically, she could do whatever, anything basically, right?
Right, yeah.
In comparison to just like the time and the ages. So like I felt as if that basically each of them did that sort of thing, and I sensed that sort of presence.
Sure.
In between, and then they go into like different sides to it. When they actually like delve into the actual characters and stuff. But like just like as the image is that I see before them, I saw that like hints maybe.
Yeah, I think they all brought their own sense of, obviously stardom, but also like just their like the way they normally like play a role and how they go about it. I just felt like I just really like Jimmy Stewart's style, and I just feel like as much as I do like Cary Grant and I do like Katharine Hepburn as well, I just felt like that they don't. I don't like gel with them as easily as Jimmy Stewart, I think, and so I just felt like I was really wanting to see scenes with Jimmy Stewart a lot of the time, but not because like he's Jimmy Stewart. It was just because I liked that he was always just convincing for me, and I felt like every time when he was involved, I felt more attached to the story, and whereas the other two, I just felt like I couldn't get behind as much in this film for whatever reason, which was strange. But because usually, like I feel like you were saying, if they were in their own respective films, I feel like I can get behind them. But when they were all three, but I don't think it's because of their star power. I think it was just more, or I guess maybe it could be, but I don't know. I think just how the film played out, it was that way for me.
I would agree that like Jimmy Stewart has like this ability to like just be so effortless, it seems, where like
Right.
he's so natural in that role, maybe, that like it just seems so like it seems so him, or just seems so like inviting, if that's the word, right? Where the other two, they have like other angles to their characters, and maybe they just don't play it off as like easily as Jimmy Stewart does.
Perhaps.
So maybe that's what affected you right there, possibly.
Yeah. The one thing that I think the starter question that I have is, and I was like thinking about this throughout the movie. How do you think, like, do you think that this film aged well? How do you feel about that?
Like in certain areas, sure. In other areas, no.
Yeah, I agree. I like, don't get me wrong. I don't think this was a bad movie, but I don't know. I just felt like I wasn't able to connect with the story like as much as like other films that I have seen with these three, and like obviously not together because I think this is the only film they've ever done together, them three, but more so just like with this story. Like I didn't think it was bad, but I just felt like I was like thinking to myself, like almost like constantly throughout the movie, I was just like, man, I just feel like that this film hasn't aged well. Like it goes from, personally, I kind of felt like the dialogue was poorly written for me, like personally, and obviously some of like the stereotypes and tropes that are in this film, of course, and I did do a little bit of research though, and I did learn that these kind of stories with the comedy of remarriage was commonplace in the 30s and the 40s. It was a popular genre in film. So with that knowledge, I was like, okay, so I can see like where it fit within that time period. And it probably did with a lot of other films that were probably just like this one, where we have a couple, they get a divorce, they go in their own separate ways, but then they end up remarrying in the end. And I don't know. I guess that story to me is something that is outdated. So it was harder for me to get into the story, I would say. I think it's simply because of the presence of these three, it was easier for me to enjoy.
I think what like outdates it, if anything, to me is just like some of the ideas around it, possibly. Like going into like specific, it's basically like certain characters and just what they're supposed to go through and like what it means for them, essentially. I think some of that like ideology could be outdated. I don't know about like the just the fact of the remarriage stuff. Like I think that's okay, I guess, right? Like sure, make a film about it, but
Yeah.
I think it's just more like the actual concepts when it goes like to in character and like what each individual like represents and stuff like that. Like just their mindsets on why are they doing the stuff that they are doing, and if they are right and wrong stuff, basically like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like I guess so I'll just go into like just individual characters and just who they are. Katharine Hepburn is playing Tracy Lord, I believe.
Yes.
And she's supposed to be like this basically like a higher upper class woman.
Yeah.
And she divorced C.K. Dexter Haven, which is supposed to be Cary Grant. And we see that like at the beginning of the film, right? And basically for Tracy, well, again, it depends on whose side you see it from.
Correct.
Where like she divorces Dexter, or Dexter divorces her. I don't remember. I think it's her divorces Dexter.
Right.
Where basically, she dislikes him for his alcoholism.
Right.
And and then he thinks that it's the alcoholism, but also that she sets too high of standards just for their lifestyle and for like what each individual could do, because apparently again it goes into like her character where apparently she sets those standards for her spouses and her family and all that stuff, right? Yeah, apparently to everybody around her. It depends on who you ask. And then here comes Jimmy Stewart with he's just some random reporter for like well, no, I guess he is a random reporter, but like the people who want to cover the new marriage of Tracy Lord, they basically want somebody covering it because it's going to be like a really good story.
Right.
And they use Dexter to basically get in, but also blackmail at the same time, which is kind of like, again, this is like a layer that's like, why even add it to the film? Because it just confuses stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And basically, just to sum it all up, here's another guy who eventually sees like some goodness in Tracy, while everybody else kind of like blames some stuff on her.
Well, I would actually say idolizes her if we're talking about.
It depends on who it is, technically.
Exactly, but I think that people like Tracy's new fiance, George.
Yeah.
And
Ridge, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So people like George who idolizes her, and basically the people who have this idea that Tracy's, this goddess and this angel and she's perfect and without problems and things like of that nature. So that's another aspect to it.
Yeah, and that's like the new husband George's side of it, where he's the like idolization of her, like she's perfect. And then Jimmy Stewart's character, which is like what's his name, Connor Macaulay, something like that. Connor. He and his side is like he's this like a Jimmy Stewart character, really, where he's the everyday man who kind of sees like he dislikes this upper class society stuff, but he kind of sees some I guess good thing come out of it in some ways, and then he basically sees her for an actual real person.
Correct.
And where Dexter Haven, which is Cary Grant again, his character is like the divorced husband who he likes her, but he thinks that she's like too demanding in that sense.
Yeah.
And then she basically has to like come up with who she likes basically by the end.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's more about it's more like she's coming to the realization of who she is and accepting those imperfections. It's not about. I wouldn't say that it's about like, oh, who does she like in the end. It's more about herself and learning.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You're correct. It's but basically, yeah, we come to that sort of conclusion. That's what we talked about, where basically the remarriage happens with Dexter. But basically, I think going back to this like outdated sort of scenario and like who was right and wrong, I would say in like so I think it was kind of just weird how like Dexter would basically. It's kind of hard to tell whether or not like he did actually like her and whose side he was on, which is like kind of like conflicting. Where George, stay on Dexter. Well, that was conflicting. Where like did he like her or did he not like her? And the fact that like I can see a sense where he could possibly blame her for like setting high standards if that's a real thing, right?
Okay.
But like maybe not the alcoholism part. Like I can see someone not liking the alcoholism and like saying no to that, right? Whereas in George's case, his is probably like all wrong, where like just idolizing her and putting her on this pedestal, where actually not liking like the concepts, or who she actually is, just this idea,
Right.
Or that's what George is probably all wrong. And then when it comes to like Jimmy Stewart's character, I guess his part was also wrong, only for the fact that like I feel like we didn't have like enough time for that like whole development, and that he's basically like I feel as if like a wrong place, wrong time thing. Where sure he did like her in some sense, but like he had this other reporter character that. She liked him, and he seemed not to even notice and like be inconsiderate in that sense,
Right.
possibly. And yeah, and then also if we go to like the father, right? The father was completely wrong in my opinion, where like where he blamed her for like this affair thing, because that's where the blackmail stuff happens,
right? And that's where it comes from.
And yeah, for me. The father was completely wrong. So, like I said, there was different aspects in Philadelphia's story where, like, sure, like I can see some characters having some validity to it, but where others is like, I don't know.
Yeah. So, with this, and I actually wanted to bring this up with all these like different characters at play, and we have to follow along. I did learn that the Philadelphia story was based on a Broadway play of the same name, and there was even like another character included in the story, but they were removed from the film to provide room for Mike, Jimmy Stewart's character. And as I was watching this movie and like how we're discussing about all these different characters and like the complexity of what seems to be an overcomplicated story.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
Correct. I was like thinking throughout as we were watching, I felt like that this would feel better as a play, as a stage play that you could watch via theater. I felt like that this film feels better for theater. This kind of story feels better in that medium, in my opinion. Especially like when we come to things like the dialogue, but especially with the characters, because I think with all these different characters involved, I felt like it's a little harder within film. And like you were trying to say that we didn't have a ton of time with Mike and Tracy to develop this relationship so we could, or at least like, play with the idea, because obviously in the end, as we see, they don't end up getting together or anything like that. But it just kind of felt like weird, not to the point where Not to the point where I felt like it came out of left field because I saw it coming, but it almost felt like it wasn't quite enough either for like getting information to where, or getting enough feeling to care about the relationship.
I think like in essence, it makes sense.
Right.
Right. Even like the whole like just the idea of it happening makes sense. But like you said, it probably just because of time constraints or just we didn't have enough time with each of individual characters, which is kind of like it was just weird. Like we didn't have enough time to like see certain things and certain things develop. But like it makes sense for like somebody after like a bunch of like I would say like the putting down of Tracy Lord, where another character comes in and sees like the good side of stuff. Like that feels good, like as a redemption sort of scenario.
Oh, right.
But like just kind of how we got there in movie time, it kind of felt somewhat, like out of balance. Where in a play maybe we could have had some sort of like different scenarios, like maybe a lighting could like maybe shine upon certain areas, but and like even like an extension of time possibly.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one we don't have enough like information to like, okay, this is where we're supposed to be, and with this overcomplication of stuff not clearly like labeled out, you're like, okay, so this is supposed to be here, this is supposed to be here, and you might not get there in time.
Yeah, you try to like understand like the things that are at play, and I don't know if I would even say, I don't even know if I would really say that maybe time isn't or not necessarily time, because I think time was an issue for the story, but I think I would rather say like information, because I think we did have information there to put pieces together. I just think that it wasn't, and we don't necessarily need to be clear about information in a film, but it has to be clear enough to where we can at least infer some things like a little bit easier, especially like when we have so many characters that we need to follow. We need to understand their different motives behind why they're trying to help out or not help out a certain character. And I just felt like, and I think you used the perfect word, the idea of like the film just felt imbalanced a lot of the time, in my opinion, where I felt like we were just here in one moment and then we were here in the next, and then it just starts slowing down again, or then it picks up really quickly. And it just felt like it was like that throughout the entire movie. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe this is only for like the beginning and or like at least in the first few moments of the film, and then it's going to start kind of slowing down a little bit. And then it never did. Right. So it just felt like I was already confused at the point where I didn't even understand Mike and Liz's like I didn't really understand their place in the story in the very beginning. I understood, the one thing I did understand was the fact that they didn't feel, or at least Mike didn't feel like it was the right thing to do by, going in there and, being the paparazzi essentially, whereas Liz was a little bit more open to the idea of it because she needs the money. And I didn't even like catch the whole blackmail thing either until we were like midway through this whole charade of Tracy and Dina, I believe, who's her sister, her younger sister, or I don't even know who she is. Yeah. And this whole charade with them trying to play with the reporters and everything. And I was like, I was confused. I was like, what's going on here? And it just felt a little like I was able to catch on, but it just took some time. And I just felt like a lot of the film was just like me trying to catch up to things. And it's like, is this what this scene's supposed to mean? Am I interpreting this correctly? I missed some dialogue here. And yeah.
A lot of the key information is like buried in dialogue, which is kind of like unfortunate because again, it's not as clear
Correct,
to the
yeah.
audience to follow along. Especially like the whole blackmail scenario. I felt like I couldn't figure out who was blackmailing who. You know,
Yeah.
it's like okay, it's the reporters, you know, the Spy magazine or whoever. That's who's blackmailing because you know they want access because apparently. I guess we even saw this too, you know, like they don't really like reporters around to, you know, document their life, right?
Yeah.
And you understood through even like Jimmy Stewart's character, you know, where he's basically he wants the real. He doesn't like this fake, you know, stories where they just for the story of a newspaper. He just wants to write the real stuff,
Right.
And you got the sense that you know. He thought from an outside perspective, you know, this rich class, upper class society, they wouldn't be, you know, down to earth, real people, right?
They'd be fake essentially in his mind.
And that's basically how we eventually get to him and Tracy, you know, scenarios and stuff like that. But
Right. So we can like gather some information from the story.
totally, yes. It's just again this sort of like imbalanced, very much information buried. It's like in the same wavelength as like like essential information. So it's like okay,
Right.
we can't decipher which is which. That's why I'm like in like a play version, you know, we could use certain other aspects like the lighting to like shine upon certain things. Like okay, make sure you pay attention to this moment and stuff like that. Whereas
Right.
a film, again, this is black and white too. So like I guess you could work with shadows, you know, to do that sort of scenario too. But like it was difficult because they didn't really use any of those aspects. It's very much keep up with our dialogue to find out what's happening.
Yeah, and if we're gonna talk about time quite literally, I like how you brought up like the idea of like, you know, time of day and shadows and everything in this black and white film. That was another confusing thing. Time of day was confusing in this movie. I was like, is it night now? Is it day? Is it like, are we midday? That was extremely confusing, and I thought that was poor in this movie, personally. Like, I was watching, and I couldn't even follow time of day. And I thought that if I can't follow time of day, and I have been able to in a black and white film, it's possible, even without color. But I felt like that this movie just did not like accurately or easily represent those different times of day. Not necessarily, not really saying that, oh man, it's a necessity in order to know like what time of day that we're in. I don't think it's always necessary, but I think that in some cases, if it has to follow the story for like, okay, this happened on this day, and now we're at night, and now this big moment's happening, and we need to be able to like set the tone and set the setting. And if we
Right.
can't do that, then we're lost already. And I just felt that. And
It's like almost as if the environment doesn't matter, and that's probably what it shouldn't be, right? Like
Yeah.
we should choose particular either moments to be associated with particular things.
Exactly.
Because it adds to the whole effect.
in the moment.
Of this, capturing this like moment. And when it doesn't feel like this is like paid attention to, it kind of like,
It becomes noticeable.
right, and devalues the whole scenario.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. It almost like sticks out like a sore thumb at that point. And it should be balanced. And again, I just felt like, of course, I think we can definitely draw certain pieces of information through characters and the dialogue and the story. But then there's a lot of moments in this film where things were just happening and we didn't understand why. Like, did the father even actually have an affair with some dancer from New York? Was that?
I think it was made apparent, but like I felt as if how they handled it was just awful.
Right, but I guess my thought is, I know what you're saying, but like I'm thinking to myself, like, so did it actually happen or did it not? Because are we supposed to be behind the father when he has that moment with like essentially just devaluing Tracy? And
I think possibly you're supposed to, maybe, but it's totally not the right move.
right, yeah, I think it went the wrong way. I understand that Tracy is in this position where she has this, these standards of being perfect, or like the idea of her seeming like she has those standards. but you obviously know that she's more than that. So it was just strange.
To my like understanding, like it was supposed to be, they were supposed to be telling us that like this character was like an over perfectionist basically,
Right, I got
and
that.
the other people surrounding her were basically trying to tell her that not everyone's perfect, they're human beings in some scenarios.
Right.
And then like you said, this whole idea of perfectionism was loved by George, right?
Right.
And then Dexter and the father and like even other people try to like tell her certain things aren't perfect, and then she's like kind of scrambling, like, oh, I thought it's supposed to be perfect, and
Yeah.
you know, stuff like that. And that's where like Jimmy Stewart's character comes in and says like, oh no, you have real values, this is you're trying to strive for good stuff, right? And you know, that's how they get together, and that's why you know they like each other.
Right.
Well, like certain, again, like the father scenario is just probably not right, and I can see a scenario where like you would want a character to undergo this stuff, but like again, certain associations is kind of like, wait, what? Like how can you know I get behind this certain scenario, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess that's what kind of like threw some things again off balance.
Yeah, and even I feel like there's that moment towards the end where we have, the moment where Mike asks Tracy to marry him in this, and that like the effort to save the wedding, really. And that was another thing that just felt like we're here already. And then it gets to the point where, it's not Mike, but it ends up being Dexter again, and they remarry. And I'm just kind of like, really? Like that's it? I guess I would just like, I felt it coming, but it just felt like, but this is the plan all along. I guess I was just kind of questioning that whole ending and feeling like was this the way to go? It felt like it just kind of happened in a way, in my opinion. I felt like in some aspects I saw it coming where I don't think it didn't feel like Katharine Hepburn's character Tracy felt like she was going to end up with Mike, but it just still just felt like they went back to her and Dexter, and it just felt weird.
I actually think it makes sense though.
It does. Yeah. No, I understand. Like, I think the whole thing wraps up nicely, but I just think that the moment it happened just didn't feel right, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm actually like in the different camp where, I guess I thought it was like, okay, it made sense for like those certain scenes to happen, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I was like off put by it. Besides like again with the father stuff, but like because I think it made sense for Dexter to be with Tracy because like that's why like she left George because of like this whole moment with Jimmy Stewart's character Connor and her Tracy, Katharine Hepburn. Like they had this like pool moments, right, where like, oh, what do they do, quote unquote, right? Because obviously like back in these days, like stuff like that is probably frowned upon. Oh, and George didn't believe that Tracy was like in the right. Basically, she did something wrong right here by doing it. But yeah, Dexter showed this like I guess maturity to where like, of course, I believe that she didn't do anything here, and I want to believe her side regardless, right? Because it doesn't matter to me, and I guess that's why it made sense. I think that at that moment you wanted Dexter to like be together with her because he seemed like the right guy technically throughout. So I guess like that's why I was like okay with the ending. I was a little bit like hoping that Jimmy Stewart and Katharine Hepburn didn't get together because I thought that was wrong technically just because of the other characters, right?
I agree.
And I know just too early and stuff like that, right? So yeah, I guess that's just my whole take on that moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like for whatever reason I just couldn't get into this film. Like I thought that I think there were good moments where I was like, okay, I thought that was a good scene or a good like moment, but I just felt like I don't know. Overall, something was missing for me, and I think maybe it was just the idea of the story. I just felt like I was watching this film and it just felt like like I know we can't really compare it because it's a completely different time, it's a different genre, it's different everything. But when we were watching something like The Fog, for example, I think going from a film that felt like it had this very realistic dialogue and real reactions into certain things, and then coming to a film that felt very scripted at times, and then the balance was off, and certain pieces of the story wasn't too clear, and it kind of just felt like it was in the background, and we didn't really need to know about it, but it would have been nice to know about it because it was mentioned. And I felt like with those, like, I just felt like I was seeing too many cracks in the woodwork, I suppose. And even like breaking it down to just like ways scenes were shot, it just felt like I couldn't even follow like direct eye, like a line of sight between two characters talking to each other. It just felt so like I don't know, like it just felt so incomplete in some way, and it's strange because I even was looking into this film and doing some more research, and it got like a lot of positive reviews and everything from like these three and everything, and doing the film, and I'm just like, maybe I just need to give it another shot. But it just felt like maybe knowing with what I know now and watching it back again, I might have a different take on it. But I feel like at this point, I'm just like, it wasn't what I expected.
No, I totally agree with you in the sense where like you felt like this is like not living up to, I guess, what you would imagine these three could be capable of. Like there wasn't like a outer world that we were like captured by. Like it's not like this like Alfred Hitchcock film, you know, where you're like, okay, I understand these certain scenarios and I'm in this certain world, you know, where you're captured by it. Even the same with like John Carpenter, you know, with The Fog, where we get these ideas of certain characters, and then we're led on this like adventure journey, you know, throughout their every obstacle that they have to overcome, right? And this one, it's very much like, I think it has like good possible, like in certain areas, relationship like ideas, but like after that, that's probably it, you know. Where like it's too overcomplicated with certain scenarios. We didn't need this like you know, overcomplicated plots to understand these scenarios. There was too much dialogue, you know, just to follow up. Like maybe for the time it's fine, but like I feel as if you could have told less, you know, throughout. Maybe I want to say there wasn't too many moments where they use like the full utilization of like just like you said, camera and just the background setting. The only place I think in this film where it was like, oh, this is actually like taking advantage of those scenarios is like when Jimmy Stewart first went into this like room of presence.
Oh, right.
And then he took the spoon, and then he's just looking throughout, and then, you know, the camera zooms out to see this like butler just looking at him.
Right.
And they had this like moment of like, oh,
that was a great moment.
Yeah, it was like, it's a comedic moment, you know, where he's like, oh, no, I'm not stealing anything, you know, I'm putting everything back. And, you know, he slowly goes back and like eventually just runs into the other room.
Right.
That's a good moment, I think. They took, they used all the correct, I guess, concepts to add to that sort of idea. But like after that, it's like you could, maybe this is too harsh, like just equate it to, you know, they're just shooting at this place and putting the camera there and that's it.
Yeah. Like I felt like probably the scene that was the most like kind of like messy, I felt like, was that moment where they're at the pool. I felt like that was a really messy scene.
Especially where like Jimmy Stewart just leaves and like, okay, he just comes back later and we don't have like some sort of mention like what happened there.
Right. Well, I wouldn't even say just that, just like the way that the camera's positioned and everything and going back and forth between like cutting between the characters, and it was strange. It was a little strange to watch, and we obviously have to remember this was 1940. So obviously I think at this point, you know, we have to give it some slack in that kind of camera work because it's not completely refined yet. But like if we take it for something like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which I believe was also made in the same year or was made the year prior actually in 1939, and it is very different in terms of camera work.
I wouldn't say just because it is like from the 40s that we should probably give it a pass because no, like you just said,
Yeah, it's like
there's other films that actually I think do a better job in it.
yeah, and because even something like It Happened One Night with Clark Gable, I felt like I think that was a 30 something film, 35 I believe, and even that film had much better like camera work.
I think it does have to do with just the script. It's just too dialogue heavy and stuff. Again, with the overcomplicated plot, it's like it doesn't seem as I don't want to say like free flowy or like you can understand certain scenarios as easily.
Yeah,
like there's concepts in here where it's like okay, yeah, sure, but like it's kind of like it's very much in like a jumbled. I don't know what you want to call it,
Yeah, just kind of a all over the place story at points. Not all the time, but I think just like at points and like we're saying dialogue heavy. I am interested to check out High Society, which is technically like the remake of Philadelphia Story that came out in '65 in the form of a musical with Grace Kelly, Frank Sinatra, and Bing Crosby. And I'm a little interested to see how the story takes place in something like that, where they're completely like shifting the tone, I would say. And I wonder if it works that way.
I don't think it will. I don't think it will work. I think Katharine Hepburn was probably the correct choice here.
I'll agree with that.
Immediately. I think this role was written for her somehow, right?
It was actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was quite literally written for her.
You could like, I think she's perfect in the role. I think actually, I think possibly Jimmy Stewart was the wrong choice, possibly because I think he's too. I don't know, like maybe the fact that maybe he obviously is younger here, but I think. He could have been in the scenarios like Cary Grant's character. I feel like he would have been smart enough to know this sorts of stuff, but like we could just say, oh, this is young him maybe.
Oh, okay.
Or like like just like you said, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Maybe no, he was even smarter than there too. Like I don't know. I think in this film, in actuality, Jimmy Stewart was a little bit not as smart as he usually is when he plays his characters. But I think Cary Grant was perfect too. Maybe I just think that they did Jimmy Stewart a little bit wrong, maybe, possibly.
You know that Cary Grant wasn't Katharine Hepburn's first choice?
Yeah, it was Clark Gable, right?
Yeah. And I think it was Spencer Tracy who was supposed to play Mike Connor, which was Jimmy Stewart's character. So, obviously they ended up going with both Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. And again, I think with all three of them, it is great to see all three together, and it is a little strange. I will admit, like when we both saw them together, it almost felt wrong in some ways because it's like how you were saying too much star power, and we're like, wow, this is kind of unreal. But I think for me, as I was watching it, I didn't feel like distracted by that. I think at first I was like, oh man, that's crazy. But then as we went further in the film, I was like, okay, it just kind of seemed to work. But again, I just felt like, not that I don't think that this is necessarily a bad film. I think I just need to give it another try, especially like with what I know now and seeing like how like it works. Like I really did like scenes with like Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn together. And I think that they did have a lot of experience together at this point already, because I think they had like 3 other films prior to this one. So you could definitely see the chemistry between the two. And, because I like the scenes when like he, gave her the boat as the wedding gift. That was like kind of neat to learn about that little backstory between the two of them with the that boat. And I totally forgot what it was called now. It was something Love. But it was kind of like a neat thing of like character, and also just like, the witty dialogue that Cary Grant had. I don't know. I guess that there was just moments where we did also have like some moments of that were supposed to be humor and comical, but I felt like it fell flat, or like at least went over our heads or of some kind,
Yeah.
And obviously that's going to happen with some like an older film. Sometimes you just don't catch those things. But I felt like, but I can't exactly excuse that because it's an older film, because older things, like you do find that they are like funny, and it's not always like, they don't always fall flat. Just because it's old doesn't mean you're not going to understand
Right.
it.
It's dialogue. It's dialogue. It's just how we express that comedy, basically. And dialogue has changed, obviously, throughout. And what we find, immediately to be funny, obviously can shift because of that dialogue change. Yeah, I want to say like all the actors did incredible, right? Like
Right.
all of them were perfect. I just like said like certain stuff was like maybe I feel as if they, especially for like Jimmy Stewart, just how I've seen him, elsewhere. I was like, oh, I'm a little sad for his character here, but like everybody else, they're fine, right? Yeah, I guess this movie is like, man, I kind of wish to see like another scenario where a bunch of them are like in one film again, because like I think there's certain aspects we could like explore, I guess. Because like don't get me wrong, it's fine, right, with the whole scenarios that we did, but I just felt like again it was a little bit like maybe overcomplicated, I guess, just for right now.
Right, and didn't necessarily need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there we have it. George Cukor's American romantic comedy, The Philadelphia Story. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The End Credits. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The End Credits Podcast, and over on Twitter at The End Credits. If you're watching the video version, make sure to subscribe to the End Credits YouTube channel. That's it. Thank you and goodbye.